Good day, everyone. Hope you can all hear me. And we had some technical issues with people coming into the webinar. That's why we are running a bit late. But hopefully people will join slowly. Otherwise, this meeting is recorded. So I'll start on the presentation on. So welcome to the webinar, status of PFAS legislation in the EU. So today I'll say a few words about the PFAS partnership, and then I'll give the word to Peter Juhl Nielsen from the Danish EPA that will walk us through the status on PFAS legislation in the EU, and then we will have a Q&A session in the end. So hopefully this meeting, we have created this meeting because it was asked for by the members of the PFAS partnership. I'll come back to the PFAS partnership in a minute. So that's why here I hope you will go home afterwards, go to lunch with a better understanding of the PFAS legislation in the EU, and hopefully you can use it to support your decision making on this on the PFAS agenda. So I'll just say a few words about the PFAS partnership, the Danish EPA's PFAS partnership with the industry. So it's operated by Danish Teknologisk Institut, among myself, and we have a steering group and a big knowledge network and some important partners that are operating the network, the partnership with us, Standard, Invirke, Aperion. So the PFAS partnership is to accelerate phase out and minimization of PFAS through a shared effort. So we have some core values in order to accelerate this. And it's, I can say we have more than 70 members that are collaborating across different sectors, sharing experience, knowledge, developing tools together with us and the Danish EPA. So it's free to be a member of the partnership, and your engagement, if you are part of it, is expected but not required. And we have the hypothesis that the partnership deliver the most value when we are a lot of different companies taking part of the solution, and also the value for the company, for all those engaged, is to be part of the process, to be part of developing tools, be part of sharing knowledge, receiving knowledge, in order to accelerate this phase out and minimization of PFAS. So that's what we're working on in the partnership, and it will run through 26 and 27. And you can find more information on pfaspartner.dk. Also, if you are interested in joining. And it's also on the web page where you can find some resources, some information about the partnership and what we have developed. Everything from how to put PFAS on the agenda in your own company. What is a PFAS? What is PFAS? Q&A on the PFAS agenda. Change management about communicating PFAS phase out, and more will come. So please reach out to me or my colleagues, and you can do that through pfaspartner.dk. But I think now I will give the word to Peter, what we're all here for, to hear about the current status on the PFAS legislation. So Peter, I will give the word to you, and you're just welcome to introduce yourself, and then just please just begin.
Thank you, Martin. So hello everyone, and thank you for joining today, and sorry for the delay of this webinar. We now have a government. That's very nice. My name is Peter Juel Nielsen, and I'm working for the Danish Environmental Protection Agency, and I am in the chemicals unit. I've been working with PFAS for the last 4 to 5 years, mainly on the PFAS restriction proposal, where I've been responsible for the Danish side. And then I've been working with PFAS internally in the EPA as well. Yeah, so that's generally the background. So today I will just give you a short presentation on the status of the PFAS legislation in EU. Let's see if I can get this working. So a short disclaimer, the webinar mainly covers the product-specific legislation. There can be other EU regulation regarding PFAS, such as the environmental quality criteria, that I will not be addressing in this presentation. The main focus of the Danish EPA and the restriction, universal PFAS restriction proposal was construction, lubricants, energy, and electronics and semiconductors. There's a lot of different sectors that was assessed by the 4 other countries, Germany and the Netherlands, Sweden and Norway. And I have some insights, but there might be questions that I cannot answer without contacting these colleagues. Also, as some of you may know, the updated proposal was submitted in July 2025 to ECHA, and it therefore is in their hands. And any questions related to the timeline and process should be directed towards ECHA and eventually the Commission. And lastly, this information in this presentation reflects the proposal prepared by the 5 member states and do not include the opinions of RAC and SEAC. So the content of this presentation, shortly I will just tell you a bit about PFAS. A lot of you may already know this, but I think it's nice to set the stage. And then I will move on to national and EU legislation of PFAS, followed by the REACH process and the universal PFAS timeline. Then how a restriction proposal is made, and the EU PFAS restriction proposal, specifically what it includes, along with derogations and so on. And I will then finish off with a topic on the consultation of SEAC draft opinion and the final steps before we take questions.
Peter, yeah. Sorry, before I just forgot to tell you that the questions, you are welcome throughout the webinar to ask questions up in the Q&A in the top bar. And after Peter's talk, we will go through the questions and answer as many as we can in the time we have. So please just write your questions in the Q&A button on top. Sorry, Peter.
No worries. Okay, so PFAS is a very large group of substances. It stands for per and polyfluoroalkylic substances, and they're defined as fully fluorinated methyl or methylene carbon atoms without any hydrogen, chlorine, bromine, or iodine attached to it. PFAS has developed through time. The Chemicals Agency evaluated that around 3,000 PFAS were around in 2015. OECD in 2018 said nearly 5,000. US EPA said 12,000 in 2021. And in the proposal, we say more than 10,000. But in theory, there's actually millions of PFAS. PFAS is generally used because of their unique technical properties. It's water, oil, and smudge repellents. It has resistance towards high and low temperature, chemical resistance, low friction, wear resistance, electrical insulation, and a lot of other properties that are needed. PFAS, what makes PFAS special and problematic is the carbon-fluorine bond, which is the strongest bond in organic chemistry and which makes PFAS very persistent. And these are one of the hazards of PFAS. Why we have focused so much on PFAS is that the group, each substance in itself is very persistent or can degrade to a very persistent PFAS. And then there's underlying concerns. We have some subgroups that has bioaccumulation, some are very mobile, and some have very long range transport potential. They can also enrich in plants and have a lot of different toxicity, liver toxicity, immune effects, hormone effects, and so on. So it's the combination of the very high persistence along with these other hazards that's worrying about PFAS. The PFAS universe is quite broad. We have in general the non-polymers and the polymers, whereas most of you may know the most common ones, the PFCA and PFSA, as you can see up here. These are the PFAS and PFOA related substances that's covered in this group. But then you also have the new PFAS types, the PFECAs and PFESAs. These are the ones that in some cases have replaced PFOA, you know, maybe Gen X or Adona as alternatives. And then we have the polymers. The fluoropolymers are very widely used in pretty much all sectors. PTFE is one of them, Teflon, as some of you may know. And then we have side chain fluorinated polymers. These are sometimes used for coatings and paints. And perfluoropolyethers, these are generally used more as lubricants. And we also have fluorinated gases. These are not really represented in this table. A lot of regulation is also already in place for PFAS, and what is important to know, as you can see in this figure, these red PFAS, it's a bit old, but are regulated indirectly. So for PFOA, there's a restriction. It actually also covers PFAS that degrade to PFOA. So that can be these fluorotelomere alcohols that you can see down here. So moving into national and EU legislation. So in Denmark, we have a national legislation started back in 2020 for PFAS and food contact materials. This covers PFAS in cardboard and paper and food contact materials, unless there is a barrier that ensures the migration is not, there's no migration to food. It covers placing on the market, and there's a limit on 20 ppm. In 2023, we introduced PFAS in firefighting foam concentrate for training purposes. This is, of course, related to a lot of the incidents in Denmark with the training foam. There's a ban on import and sale with a limit value on 1 ppm. And one of the newer ones is PFAS in apparel, footwear, impregnation agents for consumers. This bans import and sale for consumers, and it covers articles and mixtures. It can be membranes or coatings on your raincoats. There's a limit of 50 milligram fluorine per kilo, and this legislation applies actually the 1st of July with a transition period until 1st of January for stocks. And lastly, we have PFAS active substances that can degrade to TFA. We have 6 substances, as you can see here, which bans a total of 33 pesticides for the sale and use, and it applies between the 30th of August 2025 and the 30th of November 2026, and this is dependent on the availability of alternatives. Moving on to EU PFAS regulation currently in force, we have the most common, well-known ones, the PFAS and PFOA. PFAS was initially introduced in REACH, but then transferred to the Stockholm Convention, and later POP in EU, whereas before it was directly introduced into POP. Then we have TDFA, a less well-known PFAS, but it is used in impregnation agents, and it is not allowed for consumers in concentration above 2 microgram per kilo. Then there's C9 to C14 PFCA. It's salt and related substances. These are related to before, just the longer chain ones. They have been restricted in 2023, and currently they are about to be adopted under the POP in EU, but extending the restriction to C21. And lastly, we have PFHXA, also with salts and related compounds, which was restricted in 2023. In addition, PFAS is also sort of regulated through CLP, as approximately 160 substances has hazard classification. PFAS substances has hazard classification, and approximately 90 substances is on the list of very high concern. This includes also the salts of already banned substances. Moving on to the upcoming EU PFAS regulation, we have PFHXA, which is adopted and becomes active in October 2026. Similarly, PFAS in firefighting foams that becomes active also in October 2026. For the PFHXA, this is a bit special, but this is not the entire group that's banned. It's particular uses such as textiles, footwear, paper, and cardboard, as well as mixtures and cosmetics. This is not something that is applied in all other PFAS restrictions. Then something rather new is other legislation on PFAS in food contact packaging and PFAS in toys. And both of these PFAS in food contact become active in August 2026, and this is a bit wider scope than what we have in the national legislation. So it also includes plastics. And then PFAS in toys, it will become active in 2030. Lastly, my main work, the universal PFAS restriction, it's not yet adopted. We forwarded an updated proposal in 2025 to ECHA, and RAC have now adopted their opinion, while SEAG is still working on their draft opinion. In EU, we also have some waste limits for certain PFAS. These are PFAS before and PFHXS. That is POP waste if it goes above the concentrations right here. But we also, under the Waste Framework Directive, have the possibility to classify some types of waste as hazardous based on the CLP classifications. So if a mixture or a gas is oxidizable gas 1 classified, then it is hazardous waste. And similarly, a substance can be classified as, or some waste can be classified if there's more than 1% of single target exposure. Single target organ toxicity, single exposure above 1%. So there are actually some PFAS that can be considered hazardous waste. This is PFNA and PFDA are some of the PFAS that has classifications and can be considered hazardous waste if they are in high enough concentrations. Moving on to the REACH process and EU PFAS timeline. So under REACH, a restriction can be proposed by ECHA or a member state. And for a restriction, you need to identify the chemical identity. So PFAS, that's of course the fully fluorinated methyl and methylene. You have to look into the hazards, effects, and risks. You have to look into the different applications. So that could be a water repellent. and then the availability of alternatives. You need to make sure that there are alternatives that can replace the use so that you don't get a bad water repellency. And then lastly, you have the socioeconomic analysis. You have to investigate what is the cost for replacement of PFAS, for instance. ECHA, RAC, and SEAC is part of this process pretty much all the way through, and RAC and SEAC is these expert committees for risk assessment and socioeconomic analysis. So the timeline, the proposal actually started way back in 2020, where we had the first meeting between the 5 countries that have proposed this restriction. We then used actually 3 years to develop a final draft proposal where we had a call for evidence and a second stakeholder consultation working on this proposal. It was published on the 7th of February, and then went into consultation from March 2023 till September 2025, where we received above 5,600 consultation answers. The first assessment of the proposal was initiated in March 2024, where it was on the first RAC and SEAC meeting, which addressed hazards, general approach, and certain sectors. And these sectors had at this point been updated based on the consultation answers. As I mentioned, the updated restriction proposal was published in 2025 in August. And we had the last meeting between RAC and SEAC in March 2026, which ended with the adoption of the RAC opinion and then adoption of SEAC draft opinion, which then started the consultation of the SEAC draft opinion. This was started in March and ended in May, a 60-day consultation. And today we're currently here. We now have to wait for the consultation answers to be managed by SEAC. And after this, the proposal along with the opinions will be forwarded to the Commission so they can prepare a proposal which will then be voted upon, and finally a restriction will enter into force. So the proposal in itself, it covers originally these 14 sectors. These are tool art, electronics, semiconductors, cosmetics, and so on. But based on the input on the consultation in 2023, we added additionally 8 new sectors. These are sealing applications, machinery applications, military applications, and so on. And actually some of the initial sectors had uses removed and grouped into these more overarching sealing applications, for instance, to have a common assessment of all sealing applications in all sectors. This picture is a part of the small summary we created as the SHE submitters, a 20-page summary of the restriction, where you can see all the uses or all the sectors covered, but also that PFAS manufacturing is something that's taken into account. We have some of the more overarching uses that's cross-cutting for a lot of the sectors. Electronics are used in a lot of sectors, lubricants, sealing, and machinery used in a lot of sectors. And then the more specific ones down here. You can look back at this at a later point. We also have cross-cutting assessments. So we looked into second-hand markets, spare parts, recycled materials, and so on. The proposal looked into the tonnage used and emissions, and this graph pretty much represents the 2020 tonnage used in all of the different sectors along with emissions. And what we can see is some of the sectors, transport, application of fluorinated gases, and these textiles are actually the ones that have the highest tonnage use. whereas applications of fluorinated gases have the highest emission of use. And as you can see, there is quite a difference for some of the uses. Machinery application have a somewhat high use, but the emissions are rather low because it's not often used outdoors, or there's a capture of a lot of the PFAS. In general, we estimated that approximately 190,000 to 340,000 tons of PFAS are newly introduced to the market annually. And if we did not restrict this, then it would result in 4.7 million tons of emission over a 30-year period. Under this restriction proposal, we looked into different restriction options. So the first option was a full ban after 18 months, and this would be a full ban of all uses of PFAS. And what we found was it generally wasn't proportionate for many sectors. You cannot do this without having major costs. Then we looked into an R2, which was a ban with use-specific and time-limited derogation. So you could get a 6.5 or 13.5 year derogation for uses with a low substitution potential. This could be in cases where the alternatives wasn't available yet, and if the alternatives hadn't been developed. So you need more research and development. And based on the consultation, we added a third restriction option, the R3, which is a continued use of PFAS with the strict emission limits and additional emission controls to try to increase the effectiveness, so increase the emission reduction generally. And this was included in the following sectors down here, as you can see. For instance, transport, there were a large use of fluorinated gases, and by checking, putting in a requirement for checking for leaks, you could actually reduce the emissions quite substantially. In the proposal, we have a total ban on the substance on its own, but in constituents, in mixtures or articles, we propose the following limit values, which all need to be adhered to. The 50 ppm can be used in cases of fluoropolymers where we don't really have a target analysis that can capture these uses. And then for the derogated uses, we have additional requirements. There are reporting obligations for 13.5 year derogations and for fluorinated gases derogations, where you have to identify and quantify PFAS so that we can follow the increase or decrease of the use. There's also a management plan for polymeric PFAS, where you have to look into the identity, and companies must justify and develop conditions for safe use and disposal of these. This slide looks into some of the derogation proposed. There are a lot more, and you can also see that in the 20-page summary that we have. There's an annex that introduces all these different derogations. The derogations has been separated a bit, so some derogations are for all PFAS used, whereas others are for fluoropolymers and perfluoropolyethers, these polymeric PFAS. So that's, for instance, in sealing applications, you're only allowed to use these fluoropolymers and perfluoropolyethers in 13.5 years. If you use a PFAS, a non-polymeric PFAS, then it will not be covered by this derogation. And lastly, we have some cross-cutting derogation. These are for second-hand articles, spare parts that are actually above the 13.5 years, and it's based on when the products actually no longer are in use. Then there's a period where you still have the spare parts available, or where you can recycle and use the recycled products. To look into this proposal, we had to really estimate the emission reduction and compare it to the cost, because we cannot prepare a proposal where there's disproportionate cost to emission reduction. And that was the major concern with the R1, the full ban. We had very high costs, and therefore we looked into other options. This is an example on electronics and semiconductors, where we ended up with a emission reduction of 72% with an RO3 and 79% with an RO2, while still having moderate costs. And this is what our general proposal then is based on. We see that R2 is probably the best solution to minimize emissions while ensuring that the cost is also proportionate. And lastly, just going into the consultation on the SEAC draft opinion and the final steps. So the opinion was started the consultation in March 2026 and ended in May 2026. And there were certain questions asked where you could be very specific on the sector and the use, and you could provide information on availability of alternatives. What would the ban actually mean to the industry? Would it be closure, general cost of replacement? And then there was also more general questions looking into some free text. You could ask or introduce some information on the practicability of the use, the socioeconomic analysis, and so on. And these inputs is then used by SEAC really to update their opinion. As mentioned, the consultation ended in May, and it resulted in 3,511 consultation answers, with the primary answers coming from Germany, Japan, and Belgium. And Denmark also contributed with around 16 to 17 consultation answers. And the main focus was the general survey, but a lot of comments were also on electronics and semiconductors, application of fluorinated gases, and energy. So there may be some changes to the SEAC opinion based on this input given. So for the final steps of the restriction, by the end of this year, it is expected that there will be an adoption of the opinion of SEAC, and then there will be a submission of the RAC and SEAC opinion along with the proposal. This will be submitted to the Commission, and from there on, the Commission will develop a restriction proposal, or how it should be restricted under REACH. This proposal will then be submitted for a vote at EU member states, along with the EU Council and Parliament. And finally, when adopted, the proposal will be published in the official journal, and then there will be a small transition period before it's in force. That's about it for me. There are a few key documents here. There's a link to the proposal, which is about 3,300 pages. You can also see the opinions of RAC and SEAC, but then we also have the summary of the background document, around 20 pages, for those of you who don't want to read 3,300 pages. And lastly, we have the ECHA use mapping that actually describes where different use are assessed and not assessed you can look at. So that's about it for now. So thank you for listening in, and then we do have some time for questions.
Okay, thank you, Peter. And just to summarize again, or just to repeat, so please just ask the questions in the Q&A button in the top bar, and I can see people already have done that. And there are some questions about if the webinar is recorded, and it is recorded and will be made available for a limited time period, probably on pfaspartner.dk. And will the slides be available, Peter?
Yeah, I think they
Yeah.
will be available. Yeah,
they'll be available as well. Okay. And there was also a question about the summary, but you on your resource on your link page here, I think the 20-page summary was included, and you can also find it on MST's website. So I think we can just take them from the bottom. I think there's a question here. Can you reflect a little on the fact that low concentrations of PFAS in products, food, contact materials, foams, etc., are allowed, and what significance this might have?
Okay, so I think you're referring to the limit values, and generally, of course, it will result in very, very small concentration into the environment. But the argumentation is that there might be already, or there are already PFAS in the environment. So there will be trace limits in all you use. So we see PFAS in water, we see it in soil and so on. And so all the products we develop might have small concentration of PFAS. And that's the reason, the argumentation for having these limit values. They are specifically set so that you can't use PFAS and still get a function out of it. So it's a balance between the two, like environmental pollution and where PFAS can it actually be used still. And yeah, of course, there will be a small emission, but looking into what we have now and still making sure that companies can create products, this is something that needs to be there.
Thank you. Yeah. So it's all about not putting new PFAS on the market in the environment. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. There's a question, I think it's been asked twice. Are there any proposed PFAS restrictions that would affect products used in drinking water installations?
Yes. So the universal PFAS restriction, along with all other PFAS restriction, actually covers these installations. So PFOA and PFAS are not allowed to be used in drinking water installations. And the universal PFAS restriction is also something that covers this. So all PFAS will be banned at some point for these installations. I seem to recall that there are some derogations for some of the uses, some of the filters that are used, and you also have a lot of sealing applications in these water applications. So there are a lot of uses that will be banned eventually.
Yeah, so a general comment is to find what kind of applications does my product fall into, and then try to look into that. There is a question here about about the background contamination. I think that's the theme here, at least. Is there anything about how limits in food products will be implemented? Since we know PFAS is in groundwater and soil, this can be transferred to agricultural products, but not necessarily from processing the food.
Yeah, so currently in Denmark, we have certain limits for that already. We have some for PFAS 4 and PFAS 22, that's for sheep and cows and so on. Actually, where we do see if they are too contaminated, they're not allowed to be then processed as food. So expect there will be an introduction generally in the EU widely at some point. If it will capture all PFAS, I'm not entirely sure, because it's going to be a bit difficult. But the most hazardous ones are the ones targeted currently.
Okay, and I think there is a question about as well about pesticides. You mentioned pesticides. Is it correct that it's still allowed to use pesticides with PFAS directly on plants used for food? Potatoes, as an example.
Yes, there are still certain types of pesticides that are allowed to be used for food production. So as I mentioned, there are some time-limited derogation for some of them that will continue until August this year. I believe it's August. I can't remember, but yeah. So it's still allowed to be used, and in addition to that, there are also PFAS pesticides that are not regulated yet. So yeah, and also in the EU, they are allowed to be used. It's only in Denmark we have these national legislation right now. But I know that it is something that is targeted, and a lot of countries is working on banning these uses because of the degradation to TFA, which is found in groundwater and drinking water.
Yeah, and in rainwater, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's pretty
everywhere. Everywhere, yeah.
Unfortunately. Thank you. There's a question here about in defining the sectors. Interested in more detail on your considerations for the pharma/biopharma sectors. Where do they belong? As they're not part of the 14+8 sectors.
Yeah, so for these sectors we have I believe it's called all the other medical applications or something like that. So we have a sector that covers some of it. Then we also have the fact that active substances is actually not a part of our proposal. So active pharmaceuticals, active substances for pharmaceuticals, biocides, pesticides is not a part of our proposal, along with a lot of the substances that are needed to develop these active substances. And that's because we have national authorities that evaluate these uses and then decides if they are actually fine to use or better to use than the alternative. So that's the main argumentation for this.
Thank you. And there is a question about in Denmark, the PFAS issue was solved by the plant protection products, PPP. However, could you share some information what is ongoing on EU level with PPP? If this is within your...
And that's a bit of what I mentioned earlier. Yeah, there's a lot of work. I know the Netherlands and Sweden have also looked into these plant protection products and TFA degradation. So I suspect there is something coming from EU, a statement or restriction or some sort within the upcoming time or within near future, sorry. But it's not my key area, so I can't be more specific than that.
So here's a quite operational technical question. Are there any thoughts on how to actually test for PFAS content in food contact materials? Is it enough to test for presence of fluorine or fluor?
So total fluorine can be tested. The issue with total fluorine is sometimes that it's not PFAS, and we can't know for sure how big a quantity. So it will often require a mix of methods where you have more targeted methods, the GCMS, LCMS, but also the top assay, the total oxidizable precursor assay. That's more of a grouped approach where you can see the degradation of certain types of PFAS. So specifically for food contact materials, I think total fluorine is one of the better methods to look into the use. But you need to be aware of uncertainties. There might be something that's not PFAS, and the method is still being developed. So the loss of detection is quite high, actually.
Okay. Thank you. Then there is a question about restriction options. Which expenses were accounted for these different options in order to estimate the economic cost? was the economic burden on society and environment a part of the calculations? As an example, economic burdens on health system and waste handling due to PFAS emissions.
The main assessment, economic assessment, focuses on company closure and the cost of replacement. So there's not a whole lot on the cost of remediation and so on. And this is also something that's been addressed in some of the newer reports by the European is it EA, I think, that produced a report on the cost of pollution, and is something that is also considered high level in the EU, but no, it is not generally assessed in a restriction proposal.
Thank you. And then we have a question: when is it expected to have final clarity of the legislation, approximately?
That's very hard to say. We expected this PFAS restriction a couple of years, or maybe 1 year ago. So the timeline has been extended quite a few times. So we can't really be clear on this. I know that it's a high priority in the EU and in the Commission. So I believe they will have something ready rather soon after the submission of Teknologisk opinions and the proposal. What it will look like and how fast it will be actually introduced is not quite clear. But there will be some, the Commission has stated that there will be some information shortly after the submission of the Teknologisk opinion.
Okay, yeah, so there has been the ECHA hearing here, and now the final opinion will be adopted later this year, according to plan, right?
Yeah. Exactly. So yeah, hopefully beginning of 2027, we have a new timeline of what will happen, and hopefully they will execute something rather quickly.
Okay, I know that was like a difficult question. I know it's out of your hands, but it's also to get when will it happen? What restrictions are expected for companies that currently treat/destroy PFAS containing waste? Will limit values be introduced for the maximum allowable concentrations? And will there also be requirements or limit values for the discharge of wastewater from companies and to municipal wastewater treatment plants?
So this is some of the tougher questions. So it's generally PFAS in waste and discharge. So we already have a lot of limit values in place for surface water, and so on. There are works on other matrices as well. We have limit values in soil. So there are already some in place that are there to limit or ensure that PFAS are not emissions for waste treatment plants. But they are limited currently to 22 to 4 or to 24 PFAS. And there probably will be an increase in the future. I know that 25 TFA will be included for surface water. But specifically for air emissions and so on, there are nothing right now, but there might be in the future. And then of course the waste treatment plants also have to ensure that they don't use PFAS in their treatment of PFAS.
Yep. Okay, then there is a question related to TFA. Will there be a ban on more compounds degraded into TFA? It is 33 pesticides products, not pesticides. Is that not correct? Was that clear?
Yeah, that's correct. 33 pesticide products. I can't say for sure if there will be a additional ban on pesticides, at least on a national level. Pretty much same response as earlier. It works in EU, and I expect that there might be something coming at some point if it covers more than the pesticides or the active substances that we in Denmark have covered so far is unclear. But we know that there, of course, are PFAS pesticides not covered yet. So there might be something that's looked into, but no guarantee from my side.
No, yeah, so GFA in the universal PFAS restriction proposal, it's also included in the different sectors, right? So it's only for those sectors, and we have been into those pharma and stuff that are not restricted by that, at least, or will be. That could be, maybe the question is about that. But
yeah, exactly. They are derogated in the restriction proposal, these pesticides. So it's other regulations that's needed to ensure that they are not used anymore. We don't know how the Commission will handle this in the end. They can decide to change the proposal and include it, but that's based again on our proposal, RAG and SEAG opinion. They will combine it and find the best solutions.
And a lot of questions coming in. It's good. As a manufacturer of PFAS components that can be used universally, is there a specific proposal regarding the controls we as manufacturers are required to implement?
Yeah, so I suppose it's for the management plan or something like that. So your components, I suppose, is fluoropolymer components generally, and these are required under, again, our proposal. You need a management plan for these uses, so you need to identify them and ensure that there's a proper disposal and so on. This has been described in the proposal, and I suspect once there is a restriction from the Commission, there will be some guidance on what you need to do as a manufacturer of these components.
And that guide, is that usually published along with the
proposal
legislation? Yeah, or is it, will that follow in general?
Usually it's something that follows shortly. So it's unlikely that it will be there at the exact time the proposal will be available. But as you can see, there is currently one for PFAS and firefighting foams. So you can try to have a look at that one and see the time frame and when the proposal became a restriction and when there was a guidance.
Yeah. During adding food packaging to the market, is it enough to have a declaration from the suppliers, or do we need to have test reports by the due line of 12th of August? I think this is for the PPWR legislation. I think that's what kind of proof is necessary. Is that something you can answer?
It's a bit hard to answer. It's my colleagues working on recycling and waste that is responsible for this restriction, really. So I can't say for sure what the documentation will be, but in general for PFAS legislation, you just have to ensure that there's no PFAS in the product. And how you do that is pretty much up to you. It can be a declaration, but if you want to be sure that there's no PFAS in it, then you can do tests. But eventually it will be the chemical inspection here in Denmark that will do tests on your products. And if there is PFAS, no matter how you have really put forth the evidence, then there will be something to handle by them and something that they will be in contact with you about. So you can't always be sure that you're within the legal limits.
Okay, and I think this is a good time also because time is running. Just if because I'm not sure we can go through all questions. If someone has question about legislation that's already enforced, question about the proposal, question about the PPWR, what do people do that? Where can they find the information from MST?
So information generally will be available at different sites. When there's new information on PFAS, the universal proposal and so on, if it's major things, we will make a news on it. And you can sign up for newsletters within certain parts of the EPA. So it can be on chemicals, it can be on waste, whatever you find relevant. If it's on environmental criteria, you can also subscribe to that. But we also do have a PFAS site where I try to update with the newest information on these restrictions and what has happened. So that's on our business or erhvervs side pretty much. So you can have a look at that to see a lot of what I presented here.
And also you have the REACH help desk for legislation already in force.
Yeah, exactly. So that's for REACH, of course. So if you have any questions to other PFAS that are restricted under other regulations such as POP, then you need to contact our general chemicals mail or some of the other offices. For the PPWR, it's our waste office that needs to be contacted.
Yeah, so if you're burning with a question, because I think we will close in a minute, that has not been answered, how do you get in contact with you or your colleague?
Yeah, so that would pretty much be the general chemicals mailbox. You should just write to. It's called. You can find it on our website. It's called chemicalia@mst.dk, and then I will most likely be the one that will get it in the end.
Yeah, but yeah, that's good to know, and I hope that I think we went through a lot of the questions, and I hope everyone can take some key messages home. And thank you all for joining, and thank you, Peter, for letting us have you here this hour to answer questions.
Thank you for allowing me to come.
No problem. Thank you. I think we will close down here. Have a good day.